If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? And welcome to episode 865 now of The Ron and Don Show. And we are back live in the Let's Show Up studio.
What is up, Ron and Don Nation?
Hey, coming up on the Ron and Don Show, a lot of you guys know that I have a number of Airbnbs. And it seems like Airbnb is in some trouble right now. And they're in trouble with me. I'll tell you why. Also, boom or bust, college towns and college cities all over America. Some are going boom, some are going bust. Why is that? We'll talk about that. And also, there's a new John Madden movie coming out, and you're not going to believe who's playing John Madden and also who's playing Al Davis. Ron and I had an opportunity to sit at a camp, a Raiders camp, because we used to work for the Raiders, and we got to overhear a conversation that nobody else heard but us. Sitting, what was that? Sitting in a lunchroom?
It was at a Marriott in Napa, California.
Because that's where the Raiders practice. We were there to cover that, and we were their sideline reporters. We slept out in a trailer. They slept in all the rooms because that's where the prostitutes came by. But that's another story for another day. But we might tell you about that.
Yeah,
anyway,
why wouldn't we?
We should tell you about the Al Davis, John Madden conversation that we got to hear that no one else did. And that's why the John Madden bus was still parked outside when he was rolling around in a bus. Before we get to that, though, can we just stop the show before we get to the news as we see it here?
Stop the show.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
My son, all of a sudden, and I try really hard to make sure, when you and I were working at Kyle Radio, I'd have TVs going all the time. So I'd have MSNBC going, I'd have CNN going on, NBC Nightly News going on.
Network.
I would be listening to Fox News because I wanted to look at a story and I wanted to see how everyone spun it. And as soon as someone says the spin stops here, that's when the spin starts.
Of course.
Yeah, and even with what we did at Cairo Radio, you don't make any money when you're doing something called a news wheel, where you're just hashing through the news. You make money when you give opinion, you get people divided, you get them passionate, you bang those phones, or now you bang the internet. And that's what politicians have learned as well. What's interesting to me is my son asked me the other day, when he heard the information come out about former President Joe Biden and the fact that there's this new book out where
Original Sin by Jake Tapper.
Jake Tapper sat down with over 250 people and he wrote this book. Some of the things that are going to come out in this book are, it is very apparent that not only did Joe Biden lie, but the people around Joe Biden, including his wife, were lying. One of those things has to do with his son. And his son was an attorney general, I think, for the state of Massachusetts at the time. And when they found out that he had brain cancer, the book is going to talk about how the whole family covered this up. It's also going to talk about when they knew that Joe Biden had cognitive decline. At some points, Jake Tapper is saying that the country was being run by a committee and not by the president. So my son asked me, he just said, hey, do all politicians lie? Because I said, well, what do you mean by that? And so he rolled through some lies of the current president, which can't be denied. And I said, well, what's one of those lies? And he said, well, he was going to stop the war. He said that he could stop the war with Ukraine and Russia, one phone call, one day on day one.
That is true.
And he didn't do that. And he said, do you think that's a lie? And I said, it's an embellishment. And he goes, no, that's a lie. And I said, you're 15 years old. You are correct. That's a lie. And then when he saw, and he enjoys watching some of the newsreels, so we've been watching that together. And he asked me, do all politicians lie? And are there any consequences for that? And he said, what about you and your business, in the news business? Because it seems like the politicians are going after the media all the time. And I said, that's interesting that you'd bring that up. Because Brian Williams, who was probably the hottest newsman in the world at the point where he embellished, or did he lie about some of the things that he did when he was covering his SEAL team when he was overseas? And some of the stories that he told about things that he saw when he was in Iraq were not true. He lied. What happened as a result of that? Brian Williams was fired. He lost his job. He went over to cable news. He lost his job there and got pushed out. And we haven't seen Brian Williams since. Dan Rather. Think about the lie or the embellishment that Dan Rather told when he was doing the evening news as well. Dan Rather has now been relegated to doing a weekly show for Mark Cuban over on some channel where he sits down and he talks about old rock and roll stars. Dan Rather was those are the consequences, right? So we're talking about this, and he said, what are the consequences for politicians? He said, it just seems like people like them more. They get more powerful. And I said, you know what? That's a question for Mr. Ron. What say you?
I mean, theoretically, for politicians, supposedly they lose the next election cycle if someone does this. This is the thing that I find the most distasteful about politics, because people have told us over the years, oh, Don or Ron, you should run for mayor. You have great takes and people would love you, and you could get up at the podium during the debates and it would do really well, and you understand public policy. And I was even thinking about this yesterday. I was like, it might be interesting someday but then I was like, I couldn't do this part, which is where you always have to they always parse their words to protect against any eventuality, and it's just impossible. So they find a thing, they go with it, whether it's true or not. And I wish there was bigger consequences for your son. And that's why with politics, it's very difficult for me I can't follow the blow to blow, because you're constantly tracking what is true, what is not true, what's a lie, what isn't a lie. Is
that something that's new, though, because of social media and politicians see, Ron, when I create division, I can create a following. When I create a problem, and I'll tell you what, I was in a barbershop yesterday. The gentleman who owns the barbershop originally was born on the Gaza Strip. He was cutting the hair of a Jewish man who has gone back to Israel and has been part of the IDF back there. Is it IDF? Is that right? IDF? I think that's correct. They're sitting there having a conversation. It was a beautiful conversation because they came from two completely different places, right? When you think about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening on the West Bank, certainly what's happening in Israel. And Israel has called all their soldiers back from around the world, right? As they continue to build this military and blow up things in Gaza. They were having a very, very hard conversation, but they were having it in a way that I think most Americans and most of us would have this conversation. Now, take that conversation to social media, or take that conversation and hand it off to politicians, and I think it's different. And even though when they left the barbershop, they didn't agree with one another, but they both listened to each other, and they were both heard yesterday in that barbershop. And
I think that's great. And the thing that Americans have done, by and large, is we have punted on understanding process. And we want a bumper sticker slogan that someone else says on our team, and we're just going to run with that. I'll take, for instance, and I've had this conversation multiple times, the border security and deportation. So it's like, okay, let's assume I will grant people. It's like, okay, someone came over here as a bad actor. Someone committed a crime besides crossing the border. They were an auto thief or murder or whatever. They've committed a crime. And so we would like to deport that person. And so I've asked people before, it's like, walk me through how this person gets deported. And they have no working understanding of how it happens. They have no working understanding. They think that an ICE agent or a cop car rolls up, they arrest somebody, and then bam, they're on a train back to South America. And they have no working understanding of how you would actually deport somebody and the steps you would need to go through to deport that person, what it would cost from the initial arresting officer to the jail time to the litigation to the deportation, what it would cost to deport someone in sort of the American justice system. And then not only that, and then you say, okay, let's scale this up to 12 million people. How would that work? And they don't know how it would work, and they don't care how it would work. They just want to grab onto this flag that is it a lie, or is it sort of a stretched truth, to your son's point, of like, we have this huge border problem, let's deport them all. That's very easy to understand. But the logistics of how that would work are incredibly complex.
And also because of habeas corpus, you can't do that. And there's two presidents that have done that over time. The last president that tried to do it was Abraham Lincoln, between the North and the South. And everyone has the right to due process. And Lincoln tried to do that on his own, and Congress stepped in and said, you can't. You have to get our permission. And so he went back to Congress. He got his permission, and that's the last time that we saw that here in the U.S. So for the current administration to feel like you can just scoop people up and throw them out of the country because you think they're here illegally, you think they've done something wrong, that's what makes us different.
Right, and that's the part that I actually like about political discourse. I like looking at a problem and then saying, you and I, we think differently. Let's come up with a solution to this problem.
Because there certainly are people that should be deported.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And where it's not a screaming match of like my bumper sticker against your bumper sticker. And in that way, I think politicians do lie. There is no consequence because you can say something that on its face is very popular. You can say, our trade relationship with China is unfair. Yeah, you're right. And I'm going to fix it by snapping my fingers. Yeah, okay. And then you snap your fingers and it goes to hell in a handbasket because that's not how the actual world works. And so the process of things, the timeline of things, that's where the interesting part is. And for whatever reason, Americans seem to be like, I'm not interested in how stuff works. I just want the end result, and I want it now.
Or the other administration, we're going to build things back. We're going to build it back better. Well, if you're going to build things back, better, especially the infrastructure in this country, how are you specifically going to do that? Or a big, beautiful bill when you say you're not going after Medicare and Medicaid, and then you see today, there's $700 billion. It looks like you are going after Medicare and Medicaid. So I looked at that, and I know everybody always picks on, and it's where we come from. They always pick on the mainstream media, and they should pick on social media, as I always say, because it's really social media that has created these divides. And I have to say, what I saw in the barbershop yesterday, and if you have a moment, check out our YouTube channel because you get to see my new haircut. It looks pretty amazing. We will see you on the other side of this. Hey, you guys, it's Ron and Don for Les Schwab. But guess what? It's the summer driving season. This is what I want you to do. In fact, my son and I are planning on getting in our camper rig, our new camper rig. Well, it's new to us. It's 25 years old, but it's new to us. In fact, we have on some brand new Les Schwab tires. And when I was talking to David over here at the Ballard store, he said, hey, make sure after you put and I actually bought some wheels, put new tires and wheels on, drive that thing around for a couple hundred miles, bring it back, and this is what we'll do. We'll do a free pre-trip safety check before you guys go on your next trip, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to head up to Canada, and we're going to head up to Victoria, BC, take a right and head over to Montreal. Why wouldn't we do that, right?
There's nothing worse than being on a road trip and it's like, I guess the brakes were bad. I guess my battery was bad. The suspension was shot.
We do not want
alignment.
Not want to get way up into Canada, and not have that free pre-trip safety check.
So go get your free safety check, the tires, brakes, battery, suspension, and alignment. It is always free. They put it up on the rack. You get more from Les. Visit your local Les Schwab, or you can book an appointment online today at leschwab.com. That's leschwab.com.
He said that's leschwab.com.
If you find yourself dreaming about a new home, go from just a dream to the dream team. Schedule your time at ronandonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. Don't forget, if you need us, go to ronanddonsitdown.com. Ron, not to bring up my son in every segment, he did ask me the other day if I think it's a good idea if he goes to college, if he's going to need to go to college, because we've been talking a lot about he's just turned 15. In a couple of years, it'll be time to make that decision. And I said, hey, I was reading an article the other day, and it said a lot of people who are graduating college right now are having a hard time finding jobs. And it also seems like a lot of colleges in these college towns are beginning to have a hard time finding students, right? This
was a fascinating story. The divide between the upper echelon colleges in America, and you can just rattle off the names off the top of your head. And I would put UW in that. You know, the UWs, the Stanfords, the Georgetowns, like all of those schools, MIT, Harvard, etc., all the Yale stuff. You have this upper tier colleges that are charging more than ever.
What about Bellevue Community College, where you and Matt off the mic went?
Well, at that time, yes, it's Bellevue College now, Don.
It's Bellevue College.
Back in the day, it was Bellevue Community College.
That's all right.
And so, and then the second tier and third tier colleges are really struggling. And this article that you and I read goes through some smaller towns where it used to be, hey, we would have the quintessential college town. You'd have a college campus. It was usually like a state school. It might be 25,000 students, and the students would come in, and everything rippled from the college. All the coffee shops, the pizza shops, the rental, the housing, the grocery stores, liquor stores, all of that kind of stuff fed off of the college. And so you had the faculty members that were making good wages, et cetera. And these towns would fluctuate in the summer, but then bam, and fall would come back and you would have the swell.
Of course.
And so a lot of these institutions have seen their student body cut in half or more.
Yeah.
And they're just laying off staff, laying off people. The businesses are cratering. They interviewed a pizza shop owner. It was like, we used to be open till 2 a.m. every night. And these 19, 20, 21-year-olds would come in, order a pizza at midnight, sit in the booths. It was lively and vibrant, and this was the place to hang out. And it's like, we close at 9 p.m. now.
Wow.
We cannot sell a pizza after 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And I really think that this model of higher education with AI is on its deathbed. The concept of, and I've heard, who was I listening to that's doing it? Stephen Levitt, who wrote Freakonomics and is an economist at the University of Chicago. He's had so much success with his books and the movie and everything. He's taking his personal wealth. He's trying to invent a new model of high school. And he talks about this in his podcast where he's like, this model of a middle-aged person standing at the front of a room and talking at a group of students.
Yes.
And I'm going to take some knowledge and cram it into your brain. Then I'm going to test you on whether or not you remember what I told you.
And then you're going to go work in a factory, because that's where and you talk about this a lot. That's how this model was created, right?
And so he says that model's dead. He's trying to recreate it. And the people that look at AI and go, oh my God, it can write my term paper for me now.
It can.
They're missing the point.
Yeah.
They're missing the point. The point for, in my opinion, for young men and women your son's age is like, yeah, we know you can do that. Show us what you can do with AI. Like the term paper doesn't mean anything anymore. Whether or not you can write a 3-paragraph essay doesn't mean anything anymore. How do you take these tools and do something with it? How do you take a good friend of ours, son was going to engineering school back east. And they're like building robots in cars.
Yeah.
Right on, first year in college. They're not sitting there going, hey, write a 3-page a paragraph essay on robotics and cars. They just went into the robotics lab and started to build a car.
It's a good point. My son came home the other day. He showed me something that he built in his class with a 3D printer, and he was absolutely pumped about it. And he built his surfboard with his name, which was super cool. And then and then I said, what is the class you had to sit in today that you didn't enjoy? And it was a class where he had to sit in and write an essay. And he said, I guarantee you that there's kids in there that aren't writing their essay like I am.
Yeah.
And they're cheating, Daddy, and they're using AI to do it.
And so we've seen this decline in admissions over the years before AI started. So it already had started, and now it's just going to accelerate. And that's why I laugh. We talked a little bit of politics in the first segment when there's this big thing of, we're going to bring back these factories and your son's age people are going to go put in the iPhone screws.
Yeah.
And isn't that going to be great? And
Yeah.
it's like, have you met a 15-year-old?
Yeah.
There is no way in hell that they are going to sit there and put screws into an iPhone.
And a lot of people that were deporting, and I would encourage, think about Kid Rock. Did you see what happened to Kid Rock this week?
I did not.
He has a restaurant, a honky tonk in Nashville, and he's also built a home there that looks like a mini White House. If you ever get a chance to look at it online, it does look like the White House.
Funny.
And he loves for people to come there, and he has a golf cart. And he comes out there, and he's actually back to drinking Budweiser now. In fact, he's almost become a Budweiser spokesman. He has a bowling alley there, just like they did at the White House in the basement. They sent him 200 Budweiser bowling balls. They sent him, I think, a year's supply of Budweiser. And so he'll pick you up. You'll roll around in his golf cart. You go bowling with him. It's really quite a house there in Nashville. I guess he no longer lives in Detroit. He has a honky tonk in Nashville, and ICE was rolling through Nashville, and they were arresting people that couldn't provide documentation that they were United States citizens. The manager of Kid Rock's bar made an announcement that, hey, if you're here and you're not documented, you have to get out now. And they looked around, and they didn't have enough people to keep his honky-tonk open. So they had to shut down the bar.
Right.
And Kid Rock was asked about it, and he said, hey, you know what? It's very clear that I'm not really hands-on at the honky-tonk. And in some cases, like some of the buildings that you see Trump on, he doesn't own those buildings.
Right, I know.
It's just his name. Or think of Britney Spears, or like Mike Ditka. They've had restaurants. Britney Spears had a restaurant down in Florida she had never been in.
Jordan's.
They paid her $10 million for her name and likeness. Mike Ditka was the same thing. In this particular case, Kid Rock owns that bar. He performs in that bar. So for him to say he's not hands-on in that bar, and I would just say living in all the border states that I have, along with you, we've lived in Texas, we lived in New Mexico, we lived in Arizona, and certainly in California. And when I was younger, I worked in all those dish rooms, and I did all that landscaping.
Never lived in Iowa.
Yeah, and I would love to take this current administration and do a deep dive on who's mowing their lawn, right? And I think there would be a lot of Kid Rock stories that would come out of this. We are deporting people that are doing jobs that Americans don't want to do. Just go through a drive-through. There's a 47-year-old Mexican woman that may or may not be documented that's working that drive-through.
So
there's not a 15-year-old kid like back in the day when we were growing up. The kids don't want those jobs. They want to be influencers, and they want to do what we're doing right now.
I would take your son and lean into his aptitude for building things, being curious about how things work.
Yeah.
And that, whether that is in college or not, of saying your brain, you love Lego, you like 3D printing, you're good at computers, you like video games,
Yep.
You have a good work ethic.
He does.
What can we do that you would enjoy working every day? And if that's, maybe it's building 3D printing products and creating his own product line. Maybe it's working with automobiles or house building or something where he can scratch that itch, and it's not sitting at a desk all day doing writing a paper.
And you're not.
That's what college should be.
Well, and the other thing is college has gotten so expensive. You look at the amount of debt that people create for themselves that they could never dig out of because they were told you have to go get that degree. And one of the best things,
it's all about money now. There was an investigation with Georgetown where they use Salesforce, the CRM platform, to get a dossier on every family that is in Georgetown, whose child is at Georgetown, what their house is worth, how much they make per year, and what they believe they can ask them for as a donation. And
wow.
It's every single person. And so they have a staff whose only job it is to go through this this Salesforce database and to call people and go, hey, the O'Neill family, I bet we could get this amount of money out of them if his kid was in Georgetown, and then they just milk you for donations the entire time. So the Georgetowns of the world are fine, billions of dollars in endowments. Meanwhile, like these state schools that were in these little college towns are struggling because they can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
They can't go and get a $5 million endowment, so I can put your name on a building. And so meanwhile, the young people who maybe aren't from a wealthy family, that are very talented and smart, they're missing that opportunity because what we care about or what we've incentivized is, can you take this standardized test? Not can you solve a problem, not can you go out and be entrepreneurial,
not can you build a surfboard with
not
a 3D
can you build
printer.
you know how to operate a 3D printer or a robot, but can you fill in the right bubbles on this test?
Yeah.
I think that model's broken. I think it's going to continue to decline unless that upper echelon of school is going to be fine. But everybody else, the bottom 95%, it's going to just continue to crumble, in my opinion.
Yeah, more in a minute.
Ron and Don, from radio to real estate. When you're ready to grab a cup of coffee and sit down with the guys, go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. I gotta say, I am pretty pumped about this movie. There's a movie coming out about John Madden. Did you see who's playing John Madden?
I did, but real quick, I'm pumped about it as well. It looks like when I read the blurb, it's more about the Madden video game franchise in the same way that Air was about Michael. It's a Michael Jordan movie, but you never see Michael Jordan.
Never seen Michael.
It's about the Air Jordan shoes.
No, it was really about Matt Damon.
It's about Matt Damon
and Ben Affleck wanting to hang out in abandoned
buildings.
building.
It was a pretty good movie, though.
They did.
Viola Davis was fantastic.
They did it on a shoestring budget.
Yeah,
everyone worked for free. And they were trying a new model that said, hey, it seems
they
like
own their own studio.
It seems like Hollywood's broken. We're going to start a studio and we're going to have everyone sign on. And if we make money, everyone makes money. And if we don't make money and this thing bombs, we don't go broke and we can go out and we can tackle another project.
But my point being, it's a Michael Jordan movie, not about Michael Jordan. And I hope that this John Madden movie is not just about the John Madden video game.
Yeah.
And that they...
It can't be. If you brought Nick Cage in, Nicolas Cage is going to play John Madden.
Nicolas Cage is in his 60s, and John Madden was 32 when he got a job.
Yeah, and
with
then
the Raiders.
when they said, and I saw the picture of Christian Bale showing up as Al Davis,
he looks great.
I don't think they could have picked any better actors. I really don't.
Some people go, "Oh, Al Davis was never that," because he's a pretty handsome guy, and it's like,
who is? Al Davis was very
That's
handsome.
what I'm saying. But when he was older, some people are like, that's a bad cast job. Go back and look at Al Davis in the 60s and 70s. He was very stylish and had a look about him that Christian Bale stepped into.
Full disclosure, our first full-time job was down in San Francisco. We did a 5-hour morning show called The Ticket 1050, kicking your ass around the bay with Ron and Don.
That's one of my favorite. We got to hire... the voice of Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Do you have
the autumn wind as a Raider somewhere?
I might.
Yeah. I don't know if we have the autumn wind as a Raider. We have our old sound effects machine. It's called the 360 that we pulled out of mothballs. So you're going to hear some stuff from
the autumn wind is a pirate, blustering in from sea. With a rollicking song, he sweeps along, swaggering boisterously. His face is weather-beaten. He wears a hooded sash with a silver hat about his head and a bristling black mustache. He growls as he storms the country, a villain big and bold. And the trees all shake and quiver and quake as he robs them of their gold. The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won.
Yeah, I love that song. We would do something every Wednesday called Way Back Wednesday. We would play that song, and then what we would do is we would have old Raiders on. And the interesting thing is, back in the day, we think now, like a lot of players look at their hot reels when they get home or even when they're going back on the plane, and they get to see themselves on ESPN, right? A lot of these guys have never heard the local radio calls. So this would be like you're locally having on a local Seahawk and playing like a Steve Rabel call, right? Well, back then there were no radio stations doing this. So we'd do a Way Back Wednesday. We would have an old Raider on like Jim Plunkett. We would play some of the old radio calls for them that they had never heard.
It was a synopsis of their whole career.
From really famous games, and we would walk through the career with them. And I tell you, I wish we wouldn't have lost those shows in Hurricane Katrina, because those were some of the finest radio shows I think that we ever did. And I have to say, the Raider organization, when you think about what Al Davis did, he is one of the first NFL owners to actually, he was a coach. I think he was probably the only coach. In fact, he started in '67 with the Chargers. And then from being a coach to being an owner of the Raiders.
Well, first he went to become a GM.
Yeah, well, then when he became an owner of the Raiders, this is one of those things where on game day, where he would go to the field and he would actually open up the gates himself when people would come to play, right? So he built this incredible sense of wealth. He really understood football. He really would sit up in the press box and send plays down, which later on would become a problem because as the game grew, he did not. But my favorite thing about him, and I don't know if this will be in the movie, is on game day, and again, Ron and I did a 5-hour morning show, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, we would travel with the team, and then we would go. We would broadcast from the Raider games, and then we were the sideline reporters. So we'd interact with all the fans, the Black Hole Gang, all the players. It was really an incredible opportunity. He would come out before every game and go stand in the end zone and thank the fans. They were garbage men. They were police officers. They were blue collar. He never raised the price. Some of those guys paid $8 a seat to sit in those seats. He never raised the price on them. Those guys never sat down. Even when the Raiders were getting blown out 41-0 on a Monday Night Football game, those fans would never sit down. He had 3 limos. One was silver, one was black, one was white. And then he had sweatsuits that matched the limo that he'd be riding into the game, right? Remember that?
More like a leisure suit.
It was, I don't know. He would have on dress shoes with like a sweatsuit.
It was like a leisure suit.
Gold chains, really cool glasses that he would put on. And I mean, and as he got older and he wouldn't do a lot of interviews with the press, people started to say he was crazy. But think about this. And we got to do one of the only interviews with him. When we had him on, he was so gracious and kind. He always made sure at Christmas that we got gifts. One year we got Raider sideline jackets, right? Another year he gave us boom boxes that were engraved. Mine said 1997 Raiders radio. And I think that one I lost in Katrina. I think you probably lost your boom box and your sideline jacket, right?
Yeah, and he gave us a TV one time.
This isn't about you, Ron. This isn't about you. But I have to say, one of the magic moments that I loved, and I'll let Ron tell the story, is we are up in the Napa Valley. They would practice every year. They built this field up there, and they'd let high school teams use it, Alwood. And then he also built a weight facility up there. So we would go up there. Ron and I stayed in a trailer out in the parking lot. We'd watch the school buses come. And I have to say, late at night, there would be some very attractive women that would be dropped off at the hotel. And then in the morning, the school bus would show up, and some very attractive women would leave the hotel.
Very early.
What was happening in those 8 hours when they were dropped off? I don't know. I do not know, and we certainly never talked about that on the broadcast. But one day, we were the Marriott had a
conference room that they turned into a dining hall.
Yeah, and then they also had a little restaurant there. We're sitting there one day, and we were allowed to actually go in and eat whatever the team was eating, which was usually steaks, and it was amazing. They really made us feel a part of things. A bus pulls up. It's the John Madden bus. And John Madden rode around in a bus because he didn't like flying around in planes. And this is when he was no longer working for the Raiders, and he was doing Monday Night Football. And Al Davis and John Madden are sitting at a table, and they're having a discussion next to us, and we get to overhear that discussion.
You're pointing at me like I should remember the particulars of this
They were talking-
discussion.
do you remember what they're talking
This is
about?
almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I do remember the day because I was like, holy crap, that's John Madden. And they sat down and I was trying to lean in and overhear what they were talking about.
They were talking about the greatest athlete ever.
Oh, no, yes, I remember now.
There you go.
Okay,
old
so
man.
This is 30 years ago. So they got into this discussion of
They
like
did.
who was the greatest athlete. And Don and I had just interviewed Bo Jackson. And Bo Jackson was phenomenal on the radio. And we talked about we played him the cut from when he ran over a Seattle Seahawk, Brian Bosworth, and ran into the tunnel. And so we had interviewed Bo. We had Michael.
Remember what Bo did? Bo was like, we asked Bo, what are you doing? He goes, well, I've fallen on some hard times, because Bo didn't do a lot of interviews either because he had a stutter. And he gets on and he didn't stutter with us. And we said, hey, they say that Bo will come on the radio if you guys can get him a box of game socks, because he loves Raiders game socks. So we went to the guys who we knew who were the Oakland Raider managers. In fact, one year we were in Seattle up here. We traveled up here with the Raiders. We needed Halloween outfits because we had been invited to go out to a Halloween party. So teams always travel with 2 uniforms. So I went out. I think I was Ricky Dudley. Who were you?
I was the long snapper or something like
So anyway,
that.
they gave us the backup uniforms. We have pictures. So we went out to this Halloween party. Just said, hey, you got to make sure they're back by game time. This is when John Madden was, John Gruden was first coaching there. Anyway, we arranged for Bo to get these socks. He gets the socks. He says, okay, I'll do the interview with you guys, because he just loves the socks. And he says, yeah, I've fallen on hard times. I'm driving a truck. So he does this interview with us, and we're talking to him. We're like, that's incredible that Bo Jackson had to go out and he's become a truck driver. Bo Jackson was driving a truck, and he had 10 of his cars on the truck, and he was coming from a car show.
He just didn't want to pay a truck driver. So back to Al Davis and John Madden. So they're talking about who was just the greatest pure athlete. And I don't remember if it was by skill or whatever. And they landed on Ray Guy.
Ray Guy.
Ray Guy was the only punter drafted in the first round of an NFL draft. I think to this day, there's never been another
Everybody
punter.
thought Al Davis was crazy for doing it.
And they said that not only he could punt the ball, and he hit the top of the Astrodome one time, punting the ball. He was their third string quarterback. They said he could play. He was the best golfer on the team, the best basketball player on the team, the best ping pong player on the team, the best bowler on the team. Any sport with any type of ball, with any type tennis, anything,
darts, badminton,
he was the best.
Very competitive, yeah.
And so
which Al Davis loved. And so
he
did John
loves that,
Madden.
and that now that you bring that up, I do remember that conversation.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And in talking to those guys, we interviewed both of them. They couldn't have been more gracious. And I'll end with this. Here's the cool thing about Al Davis. One of the reasons why you hear other people around the NFL talk about he was crazy, which he actually loved. He was the first owner out there to really pay attention to his players after they left the league. And he had hundreds and hundreds of his players. They stayed on his payroll. He would give them jobs within the Raider organization. Jack Tatum, the assassin, who was so violent, and the game was very violent. George Atkinson, all those guys. The game was very violent when he played. And Jack Tatum, because of it, had a problem with cognitive decline. And as a result of that, Al Davis gave him a job to make sure that all the players, for instance, during game day, he'd walk up and down the sideline. We'd see him making sure that they had their socks pulled up. That was the job. Al would pay him for that. Jim Otto, 00, traveled to team all the time. He paid all those guys. And still to this day, you look at other owners, when you're done, you're done. And now at least there are some pension plans for some of the older players. There's an understanding of CTE. Back then, I think Al Davis was the only one to ever really take care of his players.
He did. I from afar, I had suspicions about Al Davis, and then when I met him, he won me over.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do business with him if I was the city of Oakland, but be one of his players or work in there, he was great.
Yeah. Anyway. Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ron and Don Show. We sure do appreciate it. Don't forget, if you need us, all you got to do is reach out on our socials. He's Ron Upshaw. I'm Don O'Neill. And also, don't forget, we love to buy, sell, and help people invest in real estate. If you want to sit down with us and have a conversation, we do something called a Ron and Don Sit Down. We sit down for about 40, 45 minutes. We've done a number of those this week, and we just have a chat to find out where people are in their real estate journey.
Yeah, you can email me directly, ron@ronanddon.com, or go to the website, ronanddon.com. You can book it right there, and we even can send you our free players books.
Yeah, we got a buyer playbook, a seller playbook. We'll send that to you. You read up on that. We sit down, and then, especially if you're on the selling side, I like to come out to the property, meet you. We'll bring you I Sat Down with Ron and Don coffee mug. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Those are selling on eBay right now for over $2.
Wow.
That's pretty awesome. Also, get signed up for the Nation News, all right? Hey, I want to thank Grace for doing a great job working on our new YouTube studio this week. I want to thank Matt off the mic. And if people want to watch the show, there's all kinds of different ways you can now watch and participate in the show, right?
Yeah, video streams on Spotify. The audio is everywhere you get your podcast players, and it also is available on YouTube. The channel is Ron and Don Radio. Subscribe and hit that bell icon.
Yeah, and if you don't follow it, you can't friend request, but if you don't follow us, follow Ron Upshaw, Don O'Neill on Instagram and also on Facebook, because we take a lot of shortened versions of the show, and we place those up for on our platforms as well. All right. Until next time, you keep your head up and your shoulders back. And don't forget, you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show all night on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.